had everything figured out. A great marketing executive position at 32, a beautiful fiancée named Jessica, and what I thought was a supportive family. My younger brother Thomas was always the golden child growing up, the star athlete, the charming son, the one who could do no wrong. I never imagined he would betray me so completely. Looking back, I should have noticed something was off when Jessica kept laughing at all his jokes during our family dinners. Before I get into how my perfect life shattered overnight, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever been blindsided by someone you trusted. I met Jessica at my college friend Rob's wedding 3 years ago. She was a bridesmaid, I was a groomsman, and we ended up sitting next to each other at the reception. There was an instant connection between us. Her smile lit up the room, and we talked until the venue staff started breaking down tables. We exchanged numbers, and by the end of the week, I knew this was different from any relationship I had experienced before. Our romance moved quickly but felt natural. Jessica was a kindergarten teacher with a passion for art and hiking. I loved how her face would light up when she talked about her students or when we discovered a new trail together. After dating for 2 years, I knew she was the one. I proposed at Starved Rock State Park, her favorite hiking spot just outside Chicago. When she said yes, I truly believed I had found my forever person. We spent the next 6 months planning our dream wedding. Every weekend was filled with venue visits, cake tastings, and meetings with florists. Jessica seemed excited about every detail, from the color of the napkins to the font on our invitations. We decided on a spring wedding at a renovated barn venue about an hour outside the city. Everything was falling into place. My family background made this happiness feel even more significant. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood in Chicago, with my parents Richard and Diana, and my brother Thomas, who is 3 years younger. From the time we were children, the difference in how our parents treated us was obvious. Thomas was naturally athletic, outgoing, and charming. He won trophies in baseball, and football was elected class president 3 years in a row and never seemed to struggle with anything. I, on the other hand, was more introverted and academic. I worked hard for my achievements, earning scholarships through consistent studying and holding down part-time jobs throughout college. No matter what I accomplished, it never seemed to match Thomas throwing a winning touchdown or bringing home a popular girlfriend. My parents attended every one of Thomas's games, but missed my college graduation because Thomas had a football tournament that weekend. Despite this, I still valued family and worked hard to maintain relationships with them. When I introduced Jessica to my parents, they seemed to like her well enough, though my mother did make a comment about how Thomas's ex-girlfriend had been a model. I brushed it off, as I had learned to do with most of their subtle digs. There were warning signs I completely missed. Thomas started showing an unusual interest in our wedding plans, offering opinions on venues, and even accompanying Jessica to check out some vendors when I was busy with work. At the time, I appreciated his involvement, thinking he was finally making an effort to be supportive of something important to me. Jessica began having more frequent girls' nights out and was constantly texting. When I asked about it, she said she was coordinating wedding details. There were family dinners, where Thomas and Jessica seemed to share inside jokes, laughing about things I did not understand. Once I caught them whispering in the kitchen at my parents' house, but they quickly separated when I walked in, claiming they were discussing my birthday surprise. I was too caught up in my excitement about our future to see what was happening right in front of me. I had my final suit fitting scheduled. Our honeymoon to Italy was booked, and I spent my commutes daydreaming about the home we would build together. We had even started discussing children, agreeing that we wanted to start trying after our first anniversary. Everything changed 3 weeks before the wedding. I was on a 2-day business trip to Milwaukee, but managed to wrap up my meetings early. Wanting to surprise Jessica, I drove back to Chicago without telling her, arriving home around 2 in the afternoon. As I approached our apartment door, I heard music playing and what sounded like laughter inside. When I unlocked the door, I noticed a familiar leather jacket thrown over the entryway bench. It was Thomas's. I had given it to him for Christmas the previous year. My stomach dropped, but I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he was helping Jessica with some wedding surprise for me. As I moved through the apartment, I heard sounds coming from our bedroom. The door was partially open, and what I saw destroyed my world in an instant. Thomas and Jessica were in our bed together, the bed where we had slept every night for the past year and a half, the bed where we had talked about our future children. My brother and my fiancée were so engrossed in each other, they did not even notice me standing there. I must have made a sound because Jessica suddenly looked up and saw me. Her face went pale. Thomas turned around, and I will never forget the look on his face. There was shock, yes, but not a trace of remorse or shame. What followed was a blur of shouting and crying. Jessica scrambled to cover herself, tears streaming down her face as she kept repeating, "I am sorry, Arthur. I am so sorry." Thomas just sat there watching me fall apart with a strange detachment. When I could finally form words, I demanded to know how long this had been going on. Jessica admitted between sobs that it had been happening for months, since right after Christmas. Nearly half of our engagement. While I had been planning our life together, she had been sleeping with my brother. I told them both to get out. Jessica begged to explain, but I was beyond listening. Thomas finally spoke, telling me I needed to calm down and be reasonable. Reasonable. As if finding your fiancé in bed with your brother 3 weeks before your wedding was something a reasonable person should just accept. I threw his jacket at him and told him if they were not out of my apartment in 5 minutes, I would call the police. After they left, I collapsed on the couch and tried to process what had just happened. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Jessica pleading for a chance to talk. I turned it off and opened a bottle of whiskey instead. That night was the first of many I would spend, trying to drink away the images burned into my brain. The next morning, desperate for someone to talk to, I called my parents. My mother answered, and I broke down trying to tell her what had happened. Instead of the outrage or sympathy I expected, her response was oddly measured. She said these things happen and I should come over for dinner so we could all discuss the situation like adults. All. The word stood out strangely, but in my emotional state I did not question it. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, my confusion turned to disbelief. Jessica and Thomas were already there, sitting at the dining table like we were gathering for a normal family dinner. My mother was serving her pot roast. My father was pouring wine for everyone. The scene was so surreal I almost turned around and left. My father insisted I sit down. What followed was the most bizarre conversation of my life. My parents suggested that perhaps I should be understanding about Jessica and Thomas's relationship. My mother actually said the words, "Sometimes these things happen for a reason, Arthur. Thomas and Jessica just have more chemistry together. They make more sense as a couple." I stared at them, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. My own parents were taking their side. My father went on to explain that they had noticed the connection between Thomas and Jessica months ago and had actually encouraged them to explore their feelings for each other. According to him, it would have been worse if Jessica had married me while harboring feelings for Thomas. When I asked why they had not said anything to me, my mother said they had hoped I would notice on my own and step aside gracefully. As if betrayal was something one should accept with grace. I left without touching my dinner, my entire concept of family shattered beyond recognition. The betrayals continued to pile up in the days that followed. I discovered text messages between Jessica and my parents discussing their approval of her relationship with Thomas. Wedding vendors started calling to ask about changing the names on our contracts. A coworker mentioned seeing Thomas and Jessica having lunch together in January, holding hands across the table at a restaurant near her office. I learned from a mutual friend that Thomas had taken Jessica to look at houses in the neighborhood where I had always talked about wanting to live. Each new revelation was another knife in my heart. The people I trusted most had been systematically betraying me, while I remained oblivious, planning a future that was never going to happen. The week after discovering the affair, I spiraled into a dark place. I called in sick to work, ignored calls from friends, and barely ate. The bottle of whiskey became my closest companion as I tried to numb the pain of such complete betrayal. The future I had planned was gone, and I could not imagine how to move forward. On the 6th day of my self-imposed isolation, my phone rang with a call from Jake, my best friend since high school. Unlike Thomas, Jake had always been there for me. When I did not answer, he showed up at my apartment an hour later, using the spare key I had given him for emergencies. The sight of me unshaven, surrounded by takeout containers and empty bottles, was enough to shock him into action. Jake stayed with me that night, listened to the whole story, and in the morning made me take a shower while he cleaned up my apartment. Over coffee, he said something that finally cut through my fog of misery. He told me, "Arthur, you can either let them destroy you, or you can take control and protect yourself. Right now, they are winning. Is that what you want?" His words hit me like cold water. I realized I had been so focused on the emotional betrayal that I had not considered the practical implications. Jessica and I had shared finances, joint accounts for wedding expenses, and credit cards that were in my name, but which she used regularly. I had no idea what she might have charged or withdrawn during the months of deception. That day, I called a lawyer. My suspicions proved correct. Jessica had been using my credit cards for expenses with Thomas, including weekend getaways and gifts. She had also withdrawn several $1,000s from our joint wedding fund in the weeks before I discovered the affair. The lawyer helped me document everything and advised me on how to protect my assets going forward. I spent the next few days securing my finances, changing passwords, and collecting evidence of the financial misuse. It gave me a purpose, a way to channel my hurt into productive action. When Jessica texted that she needed to come by to collect some of her things, I agreed, planning to confront her with what I had discovered. She arrived looking subdued, with dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, seeing her standing in our apartment, where we had shared so many happy moments, I felt my resolve weaken. Then I remembered finding her with Thomas in our bed, and my determination returned. I calmly showed her the credit card statements, the withdrawals, and the legal documents my lawyer had prepared. Her face crumpled, not with remorse for what she had done, but with the realization that she would face consequences. What followed was perhaps the most honest conversation we had ever had, though it was one I never wanted. Jessica admitted that she had only accepted my proposal to get closer to Thomas. Apparently, he had pursued her almost from the moment they met, telling her that I was not right for her and that he could make her happier. According to Jessica, my parents had known about the affair for at least 4 months and had actively encouraged it, even providing alibis when needed and opportunities for them to be alone together. The final blow came when she revealed that if things had not progressed so quickly with Thomas, she might have gone through with our wedding anyway, knowing she could always leave me later. Thomas had apparently wanted her to leave me at the altar for maximum dramatic effect, but she had not been willing to go that far. Her confession filled me with a cold rage I had never experienced before. I told her she had 30 minutes to take what she needed and that anything left behind would be donated or thrown away. I also informed her that I would be pursuing legal action for the financial fraud. She left in tears, but I felt nothing but relief to have her out of my life. My next step was a final confrontation with my parents. I met them at their house, recording the conversation on my phone with the advice of my lawyer. I needed them to admit what they had done, both for legal purposes and for my own closure. When faced with direct questions and evidence, they could not deny their involvement. My father actually defended their actions, saying Thomas had always been the charismatic one in the family and deserved a partner like Jessica. In that moment, I realized that nothing I ever did would be enough for them. Their favoritism toward Thomas was so deeply ingrained that they could justify any harm to me if it benefited him. With a calm I did not know I possessed, I told them I was cutting all ties with them. I would no longer attend family events, accept their calls, or acknowledge them in any way. I was, for all intents and purposes, an orphan from that day forward. The recording of that conversation became my talisman in the months that followed. Whenever I felt weak or questioned my decision to sever ties with my family, I would listen to their callous justifications and remember why I had made that choice. The final piece of my response was serving Jessica with legal documents for financial fraud. I had no interest in reconciliation or revenge, only in justice and closure. The look on her face when she was served papers at her school was reported back to me by the process server. Apparently, she had not expected me to follow through. Canceling our wedding arrangements was a painful process, but I approached each vendor with dignity and honesty. Many were sympathetic when I explained the situation, some even refunding deposits they had no obligation to return. A few mentioned that Thomas and Jessica had already contacted them about rebooking the venue and services for their own use. I wished them luck dealing with the couple and moved on. Jake and several other friends rallied around me during this time. They took turns checking in, bringing food, and simply sitting with me when I needed company. Their loyalty stood in stark contrast to the betrayal I had experienced from those who should have been closest to me. Through them, I began to understand that family is not always defined by blood. A month after the discovery, my boss called me into his office. I had returned to work but was clearly struggling. Instead of the performance warning I expected, he offered me a transfer to our Seattle office, a fresh start 3,000 miles from Chicago and all its painful memories. It was exactly what I needed, though. I had not known to ask for it. I accepted the position and threw myself into preparations for the move. Each box I packed felt like shedding a piece of my old life. I sold most of my furniture, wanting nothing that Jessica had picked out or used. The apartment where we had lived together went on the market. Within 6 weeks, I had extracted myself from everything that reminded me of her or my family. Seattle welcomed me with its misty mornings and spectacular mountain views. My new apartment was smaller, but had a balcony overlooking Puget Sound. On clear days, I could see Mount Rainier in the distance. It became my ritual to have coffee on that balcony each morning, reminding myself that I had survived and was rebuilding. Finding a therapist was Jake's suggestion, and initially, I resisted. But after several weeks of waking up from nightmares about betrayal, I realized I needed help processing what had happened. Dr. Linden specialized in trauma and trust issues, and our weekly sessions became an anchor in my new life. She helped me understand that what my family had done was not a reflection of my worth, but of their own dysfunction. We worked through exercises to rebuild my self-esteem and develop tools for creating healthy boundaries. Most importantly, she helped me see that while I had been betrayed, I was not broken. Building a life in a new city forced me to develop parts of myself I had neglected. I joined a hiking club, remembering how much I had enjoyed the activity before it became associated with Jessica. I took cooking classes, tired of takeout and wanting to nurture myself properly. I made a point of accepting invitations from coworkers, even when my instinct was to isolate myself. Slowly, I created a circle of friends who knew nothing about my past trauma. People who liked me for who I was, not out of loyalty or shared history. There was something freeing about being known only as Arthur from marketing, who makes great chili and tells bad jokes, rather than Arthur who was betrayed by everyone he trusted. A year after moving to Seattle, I received an unexpected email from Jake. He thought I should know that Thomas and Jessica's relationship had imploded spectacularly. Apparently, Thomas had cheated on her with one of her bridesmaids, and the ensuing drama had made its way through our old social circle. My parents had bought them a house as a wedding present, which they were now fighting over in their breakup. The news brought me no joy or satisfaction, just a distant sense of inevitability. People who betray others will eventually betray each other. I deleted the email and went about my day, realizing that I had gone hours without thinking about any of them. That was progress. My focus on work had paid off with a promotion. The Seattle office was smaller than Chicago, offering opportunities to take on projects that would have gone to more senior staff in the larger location. My boss appreciated my dedication and creativity, and I found that without the drama of my personal life distracting me, I excelled professionally in ways I never had before. My new friend circle was diverse and interesting. There was Lynn from accounting, who dragged me to karaoke despite my protests. Marcus from the hiking club, who knew all the best trails within 2 hours of the city. Sophia, my neighbor, who worked as a librarian and constantly recommended books that somehow always matched my mood. These people valued loyalty and authenticity. They showed up when they said they would, and meant what they said. After a lifetime of conditional love, their straightforward friendship was refreshing. Looking back on the person I was before the betrayal, I barely recognize him. That Arthur was eager to please, desperate for approval, and willing to overlook red flags to maintain relationships that were fundamentally unhealthy. The Arthur one now understands that some relationships are not worth saving, that boundaries are necessary for self-respect, and that being alone is far better than being with people who do not truly value you. I learned that family is not defined by DNA, but by how people treat you when it truly matters. My brother and parents shared my blood, but Jake and my Seattle friends showed me what family should actually mean. They celebrated my successes without jealousy and supported me through difficulties without judgment. The most important lesson was learning to trust my instincts again. Deep down, I had known something was wrong long before I caught Jessica and Thomas together. There had been so many small moments of discomfort, so many explanations I had accepted despite their flimsiness. Now I listen to that inner voice. If something feels wrong, I address it directly rather than making excuses for the other person. I found peace without forgiveness or reconciliation. For months, my therapist and I discussed whether I needed to forgive my family and Jessica to move forward. Ultimately, I decided that some actions do not deserve forgiveness, and that is okay. I can acknowledge what happened, learn from it, and move on without the burden of maintaining relationships that were fundamentally toxic. What surprises me most is that I am happier now than I was before everything fell apart. My life is more authentic, my relationships more genuine, and my sense of self stronger than it has ever been. Sometimes, losing what you thought you wanted leads you exactly where you needed to be all along. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming life's toughest challenges. Remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it helps anyone going through something similar to know that a better life is possible on the other side of betrayal.